Hello and welcome to the newly merged Commonwealth Club, World Affairs of California. My name is Stephen Saum and I'm Executive Director of Strategic Communications and Content at St. Mary's College, but maybe more relevant tonight, someone whose life has been intertwined with Ukraine for the past 3 decades. Before we get started tonight, a few reminders. Tonight's program is being recorded, so we kindly ask that you silence your cell phones for the duration of the program. And during our Q&A session, if you have any questions for Director Mstislav Chernov, please fill them out on the cards that'll be distributed or on your seats. And if you're joining us online through the YouTube chat. Now, before we start the film, I'd like to invite the Consul General of Ukraine in San Francisco, Dmytro Kushnuruk, to say a few words. Dmytro, вітаємо вас.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Stephen, and thanks to Commonwealth Club and all the organizers for hosting this important event, important for Ukraine, important, we hope, also for the United States and for everyone. Tonight, on the behalf of Consulate of Ukraine, I'm honored to present and to say a few words at the beginning of this highly acclaimed documentary, 20 Days in Mariupol, directed by distinguished Ukrainian director Mstislav Chernov, who has just this weekend received the Directors Guild of America Award for Outstanding Directorial Achievements in Documentary. And this prestigious accolade underscores the film's powerful narrative and Chernov's unwavering commitment to capturing the harsh realities of Russian war against Ukraine. And this compelling film recently also nominated for an Academy Award for Best Documentary, as you know, and we hope it really can win, because it absolutely deserves it. And it provides the perspective of the early days of Russia full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which happened in the first months in Mariupol. So as you know, attack by Russians on Mariupol, it was the largest city which Russia actually managed to occupy eventually, because the city was basically on the border between Ukraine and Russia, and it was very, very quickly surrounded. So it was not like an easy target for Russian forces. And it was the most tragic siege of such a large city in the first months of the war. So the city with population of 500,000 people, it was also almost completely destroyed. Almost no buildings were left untouched and damaged, and it brought numerous civilian casualties, including women and children, and attacks on hospitals, of the theater where people were hiding. So all those powerful stories and awful stories which were also in the media at that time, which are not unfortunately in the American media right now. So these were all the things, the evidence of Russian war crimes. And after Russia finally captured the city, they've been hiding, trying to hide all these consequences, and trying to demolish on all the buildings which have been damaged, just to hide any traces of what happened. But this documentary is the best example of how the journalists can prevent it from happening. And also, as you know, the defenders of Mariupol, our soldiers, they were defending the city, but then they were forced to move to the Azov steel factory, which was also in the city. And they were under the ground, and they were for a very long time. And despite all the bombings and all the attacks, Russian forces could not capture them. And only after Ukrainian command gave them the order to save lives, their lives and the lives of the women and children who were hiding together with them, to surrender. Only in that time they really stopped the resistance, and they surrendered, but then majority of them were exchanged during the prisoners of war exchange, and now but not all of them. Some of them still remain in Russian captivity, but those who were exchanged are already back on the battlefield, because they're really heroes. And so as the Associated Press team under Chernov's leadership finds themselves during the movie trapped in the besieged city, and they were documenting all these atrocities of war. So this film, 20 Days of Mariupol, is more than just a film. It's the compelling testament to the impact of journalism and the resilience of individuals in the face of the adversity. And the film is hard to watch, and it should be. and it should be hard to watch, though its episodic structure makes it somewhat easier to watch from day 1 to day 20, one at a time, from the first bombs to finally the team's flight to safety. So as Stephen mentioned, the screening will be followed by Q&A with the director himself. And thank you all very much for coming. Thank you for your support. Please continue having Ukraine in your minds, as it's very important for us. Thank you.
Someone once told me, wars don't start with explosions. They start with silence.
Лично видим визуально. Танки зашли с надписью Z.
Город Мариуполь блокирован со всех сторон.
Russians have entered the city. The war has begun, and we have to tell its story.
Хорошо, что тут есть пресса. Снимайте.
This is painful to watch, but it must be painful to watch.
Вони нанесли бомбовий удар.
Вон там! Хирургический корпус, вот там вот!
А, вы госпитале, да?
Мамочка!
Не знаешь, куда бежать.
Чего расстраиваешься?
Не хочу, чтобы я умирала.
Репортажи ваши разошлись. Конечно, огромное дело сделать.
Они столько пережили с мамами.
If the world saw everything that happened in Mariupol, it would give at least some meaning to this horror. My brain will desperately want to forget all this. But the camera will not let it happen.
So it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's guest, Mstislav Chernov. Mstislav is an Associated Press journalist and president of the Ukrainian Association of Professional Photographers. Last year, he shared the Pulitzer Prize for Public Service, and 20 Days in Mariupol is his first feature film. It won the Audience Award at the Sundance Film Festival last January. It's been nominated for an Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature Film. London Film Critics Circle named it Documentary of the Year, and it's been nominated for a BAFTA Award. And Mstislav Chernov was recently honored for directing the Best Documentary by the Directors Guild of America. So Mstislav, Dyakuyu, thank you for being with us and for sharing your powerful documentary with us, for telling the story of the city, for chronicling these stories, and for joining us here this evening. Let me start off for noting for our audience here, right? We're coming up almost on exactly the second anniversary of the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia. When you made the decision, Mstislav, to head from Bakhmut, where you were at the time, to head to Mariupol, the first person that you have an encounter with is the woman, and when you document in the film, you tell her that the Russians are not targeting civilians. Was that a belief? Was that a hope?
I remember, so it was first person on camera, but I remember before arriving to the city, we made a few stops. It was already night, and first stop we made to buy spare tires. And we woke up this man at 3 a.m. and we were like, we need at least 2 tires. And he was, why do you need tires in the middle of the night? And we said, look, the war is going to start. Shelling is going to start, and that means shrapnel and you need spare tires. And he was like, you're crazy, but yeah, here's a tire. And then we went to the supermarket, and we bought a lot of food. It was like a lot of food. And again, it was the same reaction. The people buying in the middle of the night a lot of food, like many bags. And the shopkeeper said, what's going on? Why are you buying this food? And I said, again, the war is going to start. And she said, you're crazy. So every step of the way, every person who I spoke to before the war started kept saying, this is, nothing's going to happen, everything's going to be fine. And I remember when it's already started, we went straight to several hospitals. It's all the experience talking. I've been through several wars. I know how things unfold, and we've been in Ukraine. This war started 8 years ago for all of us. So we kind of knew what to expect, more or less. But again, we went to the hospital, to that hospital which you saw, and we spoke to the chief of the hospital. And I said, if things gonna go bad, could we stay here? Could we come later and stay here? And she said, nothing's gonna go bad. Everything's gonna be fine. Don't panic. And it was kind of reflection of what everybody felt and everybody hoped. And I also hoped for that. So that's the reason why I am telling people. But I remembered I responded to this doctor, and we were about to leave her office, and she said, but what do you think is going to happen? And I remember I said, do you remember Aleppo? Do you remember Grozny? As a doctor, I think you should prepare for this. And unfortunately, I was right. So at that point, I was hoping that I'm wrong, that things gonna go better, but they didn't. But then again, what do you tell the person who panics, right? You say go to the basement, hide. This is the first thing you need to do. And look, I want to thank you for coming here. I know we are all being bombarded by tragedies every day, and not only from Ukraine. And it's easy to not to care. It's easy to just to close yourself from everything and to live your life. But you did make a choice to come here. Did make a choice to care. And I think indifference is the biggest enemy of the modern society. If the modern society will keep ignoring that every day there is more and more tragedies in the world, and it's on fire. If we keep ignoring it, then one day it's going to be too late. So yeah, thank you for your care. I really appreciate that.
On that point, there are a couple of moments where you want to talk about Vladimir, the policeman, right? Because he delivers that message in Ukrainian and in English, hoping that maybe it can bring things to a stop. And then later in the film, though, you say it's to give some meaning to all the tragedy that's befallen the city. I think a lot of people here may not know. I mean, you've kept in contact with Vladimir. What happened to him after you fled the city?
Yeah. So first of all, that hope that Vladimir has that things gonna change, it always inspired me. And his drive, I think that drive he had it still has helped us a lot. Helps us survive ultimately. But at that point when he was saying that, and I expressed that thought in the film, I felt that nothing will change much. And unfortunately, we can see that things are somehow worse today than they were before. And Mariupol's story is not a story of Mariupol anymore. It's a story of Bakhmut and Avdiivka and Marinka and Soledar and Vuhledar and Volnovakha, Popasna. I can keep listing the cities that just destroyed. So things are worse. And still, he believes. He kept his going and doing his work, his police work in Pokrovsk city, in Donbass, and a couple months ago he went to help injured people who were under the rubble after the Russian strike, and the second rocket, a double tap, hit the same place. That's what they usually do. They hit a building with the rocket, then when rescue services arrive, a second rocket hits the rescue services. So he got hit by the second rocket, and his lungs were pierced by shrapnel. His body had a lot of injuries, and he went through recovery. We thought he's gonna die, but he survived, and he's recovering. And I think just today I saw a picture from him that he's already again going to these places and trying to help civilians. We actually, I think 90% of all people you see in a film, we found, or they found us, or we found them, and we followed up with those who survived, and we told their stories in our investigations and our follow-ups throughout the year. So Mariupol was never just 20 days. It just stayed with us, and we keep telling its story. We keep in contact with people who are still inside Mariupol. Just 2 days ago, that's one of the examples. 2 days ago, so there's a moment in a film when we arrive at the fire station, and it's bombed, and there is a boy under the rubble, and his mom is looking at him, and I didn't know if he survived or not. And we couldn't find him for a very, very long time. And just a couple of days ago, I received a message on Instagram from his relatives that he survived. Oh. Not only survived, he is now in Chicago and going through a recovery process. So it's amazing how people find, with the film, they find their way to us, and all the stories kind of make sense. Recently, the boy who you saw, again, another boy who you saw near the maternity hospital after the bombing, the one who was scared and looking for his mom. We found that family in Europe. So his mom was injured, and they lost contact with her. And his sister gave birth to a child, and after that they were hiding for weeks in the basements in a shelter, and then they tried to leave, and then they couldn't because she didn't have a birth certificate for the baby. But Russians wouldn't, and she didn't want to make a Russian birth certificate for the baby, and Russians wouldn't let them out from the city without a certificate. So they ultimately got away, and now they are in Europe, and they came to see the film. So what's interesting is that more people I meet from Mariupol, more I hear from them that they have such a hard experience of explaining to everyone around them what exactly they went through. It's very hard to understand that experience. And when they have this film, they have a way to explain that. They have a way to tell the story of what happened to them. And then we screened film for IDPs from Mariupol who lost their city when they moved to Dnipro, they moved to Zaporizhia or Kiev. We organized screenings for them, just for Mariupol residents. And I thought it's going to traumatize them at some point. But on contrary, they went out of a cinema, and suddenly they started telling me how much hope they saw in a film. And I didn't really understand, how is that, what? Hope? And yeah, so first they experienced this together in more or less safe environment. They've experienced their tragedy, but they've experienced it collectively, together. And actually, if you look again, if you see the film, and at every moment of suffering, every moment of tragedy, no one is ever alone. People in the worst moments of their life, they always have a doctor or a neighbor or sometimes a journalist, just some hugging them and being together. And I feel that sense of community is actually what community and shared identity is what helped people to get through these tragedies, but also helped Ukrainians to fight back, not to fall apart as a nation, but to come together and resist at the moment when it seemed that we're against the enemy, which was much bigger, still much bigger, but still people resisted.
Well, and that question of identity seems so fundamental at a time when you have an aggressor wanting to erase your country, erase that identity, deny that it's real.
Yeah, deny that it even exists, right? Yeah.
When you set out to do the work in Mariupol, right, you did not intend to make a film. You were reporting the news. But even how you approached that changed in a moment that's, a really tragic moment in the film. Talk about that and why you came to understand what was happening differently in this historic sweep that you realized was happening all around you.
So I've been through 6 wars already, and I know how and that's what I told you in the beginning. We are bombarded by tragedies and different events, and as a journalist, I see how even the most important moments in history or for specific people are just being washed away by this sea of information and misinformation sometimes. So I know how that happens, and especially when we left already, when we broke out and I had this 30 hours of footage, I knew the story of Mariupol will be forgotten. It will stay maybe in headlines, but it will be just headlines. And I really wanted to preserve those tragedies. I felt like I owe this to people who saved our lives, who helped us, to people who lost their children. So I really wanted it to not to disappear. That's when I left. But in a moment when we started reporting, of course I was focused on, and that's my main work at that moment. It was my main work at that moment, just to be sure to send everything I see to my editors, and I know that it's being distributed across the world. And at that moment, it felt like something, and I say that in the film, I feel like it was a history in making. It was a history. There was a historical moment in Ukraine's modern history, and it felt like actually a ground zero of a Third World War. Okay, well, I hope I was wrong, and I hope it's not the case, but it did feel at that moment like things can escalate further than just Ukraine, and they kind of did, I guess. Mm-hmm. After the Mariupol hospital bombing, after the maternity hospital bombing, that was the moment when I understood how important the story of Mariupol is, how symbolic it is. That's when I thought, okay, well, everything has to be recorded, every single minute, because it's not just news. This is just bigger than me, bigger than about Mariupol. And that's where you actually, even in the film, you can see how a style of editing changes, how the shots become longer. So this is it's a conscious shift to another medium already, to another kind of storytelling.
And one of the things you do capture connected with the bombing of the maternity hospital is then the Russian disinformation that comes along with that. And one of the members of the audience here actually wanted to know, have people in Russia been able to see the film? Have you heard any reaction or response?
I'm sure it's available for them. There is one streaming service, I think, that is available in Russia. That is, I think, it's current time streaming service. So they are able to access it if they want to. Also, if they use VPN, they can. Whether they want it or not, I'm not sure. And but it'll be there when they will want to see it, and I hope they will see it. But what's happening is that, again, recently we found out that after Mariupol got occupied, almost immediately Russians have sent film crews to the city, and they started filming a scripted version of the events. So these months, and it's not a coincidence that our film is gaining visibility, and it's a sad anniversary of the beginning of the full-scale invasion. They are releasing film which is called 2022 Mariupol, scripted version of their events shot on the location on occupied city, very well produced, very well made. And they are screening it in their central TV for millions of people, which will see only that version of reality. And I think that, hence the name, if you go in their search engines and you will Google 20 days in Mariupol, guess what you're gonna get, right? So it's actually, I laughed at the beginning, but then I thought, oh my God, this is actually very scary.
Well, I think perhaps it's a kind of a terrible coincidence also within the past week. Human Rights Watch and In Situ and Truth Hounds released a big report on Mariupol. A 2-hour interview with Vladimir Putin also dropped, courtesy of Tucker Carlson. Talk about the information and misinformation and the importance or meaning of truth right now.
Okay, I have a strong belief that we are, as journalists or as documentary filmmakers, cannot and should not engage in a fight with any kind of propaganda, because as soon as you start doing that, you are getting on their level, and therefore you're lost. You will never have as much resources as a country which creates their own version of the events. The only thing we can do is to keep working and keep providing enough context to the as big audience as possible, to kind of make sure that events are not misinterpreted, because we don't live in the age of misinformation. It's the age of misinterpretation. It's pictures of a maternity hospital bombing were as much on the Russian TV as they were on the Ukrainian TV or on the TV in US. It's just the text over it was completely different, and that's why documentary films are important, because they do provide much more context than 1 minute or 2 minute news pieces provide, and it helps, but it's not enough. This is a complex issue, and of course we are talking about not only about what we as journalists are doing, but also we talk about systematic education of a younger generation, or not only of young people, but just a systematic education of active civil society, of how to distinguish misinterpretation, and how to just navigate in this the complex narratives, like dozens and dozens of versions, and add here new AI, deep fakes, and all the new technologies that will be serving purpose of the propaganda. So that's something that we have to figure out quite urgently, actually.
So what can, this is a big question, but I know you've thought some and talked some about it. What can the film do and what can't it do? Because I'm thinking of the timing of when you received the Directors Guild of America award and what happened in the Kharkiv region at the same time.
Yeah, I remember that evening. I was looking at my phone. I was reading news from Kharkiv, and then I was called on the stage, and I had such a mixed feelings about it because I was reading how the family died and 3 children were burnt alive in their home, and then I have to go on a stage and receive awards, and I feel like this is not helping at all anyone. Again, you can't. It's the same feeling as I have when I'm in Mariupol. You can't stop a bullet with a camera. You cannot stop a catastrophic bleeding by taking a picture. And you stay there and you just watch child die. And then you feel useless, absolutely useless. And that makes me so sad and angry even when I start thinking about it. But then you have people who just grab you in the middle of the street because they see a sign on your helmet, the press sign, is saying, film this, or film me. And it's not because they believe that it's going to change something. It's because they want to be heard. And it does a lot for people just to know that they are heard. It just gives that they're not ignored. It gives them energy to keep fighting, to keep surviving. And that's already a lot. And then there is this immediate effect. Maybe what you send and what you're actually able to break out of the siege helps to negotiate the Green Corridor. We know now that those images helped to negotiate the Green Corridor for civilians to escape. I mean, of course, not only because of these images, because of immense efforts of different governments and NGOs, but it helped. So, okay, if this saves one life, then wow, that's already a lot. So that's an immediate effect. For the film, yeah, if this film didn't exist, then only this scripted Russian version would exist. And it just scares me. Because history is not how it happened. History is how we remember it. And we have to make sure that we actually remember things how they happened. And I hope that film adds value to this collective memory we will have in future as Ukrainians or as humans around.
Well, following up on that, and unfortunately we have time for just this last question, and an audience member wants to know, so what more can we do, right? People here in the audience, people watching.
Yeah, I have a lot of answers to that question, although I would prefer not to tell them, because I think everyone has to figure out for themselves what they want or how much they want to do. But again, as I said before, it's about indifference. If we are all able to fight that indifference, it will really help. And we all will do that in our own way by talking to people, by supporting NGOs or by voting for someone who represents our opinions. This is all different ways to do that. It's just important to remember that why I keep saying that indifference is dangerous, because here's the fact. Now, if you look at Russian media, you mentioned a famous interview, but it's seen within Russia very differently how it's seen from outside. I am being in Ukraine all the time, reporting all the time from Ukraine until now. I can see how how the Russian government explains to their people why the hell they do this thing. In the beginning, it was absurd. A suggestion that they're denazifying Ukraine, that they're protecting Russian-speaking population. Well, everything you saw in this film, almost every word spoken there was in Russian. they didn't really protect Russian-speaking population. On contrary, they were killing them. So what they tell to their people to justify these 2 years of the invasion, now they say that they are at war with US and with Europe. They are openly motivating 120 or more million people to, with the thought, and they're bringing up kids with that thought that they are at war with you and with Europe. So a huge country which in these 2 years transformed in a war machine which produces a lot of weapons, which has nuclear weapons in store and making more of them, and making alliances with other countries which happily will go to war. This country is preparing for real war with Europe and US. And that is why the indifference is dangerous, because the longer we all choose to ignore that, harder it will be to catch up with the fact that our neighbor is, invading us. That happened to Ukraine. We all choose to ignore for a long time that there is a danger right next to us, and now we are in a difficult position.
Well, please join me in thanking Mstislav Chernov. Director of 20 Days in Mariupol, and if you'd like to support the club's efforts in making virtual and in-person programming possible, please visit the website commonwealthclub.org. I'm Stephen Saum. Thank you and take care.